basically community and like marketing are just huge parts of crypto and grabbing attention. And aside from having these interesting products, you want people to also like care about Initia as a whole. And it should be like a huge part of what we do every day, right? Like caring about the community, caring about our users, like talking to them, seeing what feedback we need to iterate on, and then building the best product for them so that we can all win over time.
Amen to that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Flywheel, your number one source for everything crypto, DeFi, and all that's in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, you've come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave here with capital K, and we're here to help you harness the power of the Flywheel. And on this episode of the Flywheel, we go into the world of interwoven rollups. We get rid of all the friction, and we introduce Initia. This is an episode that, as Kit would say, you need to take out a pen and notepad for, because Kit has read the docs for you. You don't got to do any of the work. Kit has read the docs for you, and all the questions that you would have had, he's asked them, and Stan and Zani, they've answered them. So this is a great episode. Kit, quick thoughts.
If you like blockchains, this is the one for you to listen to.
If you like rolling up, this is the one for you. Rollups. Before we get into it, make sure you go ahead, hit that bell button on YouTube, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, give us a like, follow us on X, TikTok, and Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And let's get the flywheel spinning. Welcome back to Flywheel. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here as always with capital K. And this time around the Flywheel, we have on Zani and Stan, the co-founders of Initia, which is doing quite the interesting stuff in the world of the multi-chain world and modularity and all that fun stuff. Zani, Stan, it's great to have you guys on.
Hello, GM. Thanks for having us. Longtime fan of the show, and
thank you.
You two in particular.
That means a lot, and I feel like I've been seeing you at every conference, Zani, and so it's just like it's great to like actually have you on and for you to explain everything. And I know Kit wants to go in deep, but before we get deep into it, let's get a little bit about your guys' background. How'd you get into crypto? Where'd you guys were building in the first place?
Yep, I think it's a little bearish that I keep seeing you at conferences, but we'll change that. Don't worry. We'll actually work someday.
Oh, pain. Oh, I felt that. Oh. Well, I have good news. I will not be in Asia, so you will not see me there.
Okay, nice.
So I hope that's a bit more bullish, but oh, man, that hurt.
Yeah, so we'll see you though in Asia, right?
Yes, definitely. Asia's my home turf, so I will be seeing you. I was just telling Stan before the pod here is that a year ago you made an offer that if I wanted to do work, I can come to your guys' office and work out of there. So I might take you up on that now that we're coming to
1 year
Korea.
It never happened. Dude, you gotta get in there.
He just has to commute 3 hours a day. So
yes. Oh, so good. Okay,
all
so
right,
let's dive into it.
I'll give you the background. So I'm Zan. I'm a Canadian man from Vancouver.
Canadian man,
yes. Went to school in the US though. Did a little bit of computer science and business studying. And then during COVID summer, I was finishing up my master's degree, but it was, I was scared of dying if I went outside, obviously. And so I was just locked in my mom's basement, just finishing up school. As well as there's nothing to do but essentially become god tier at Super Smash Bros. As well as play with DeFi Summer.
Who's your character on Super Smash?
Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong, interesting.
Ooh, good.
I'm a sucker for Kirby.
Classic. Basic.
I'm basic. What can I say? Another one.
I choose Pikachu, bro. I'm also basic with you. Down B.
Yeah. Okay. So DeFi
So in the
Summer.
basement,
Yeah.
we're there. Playing with DeFi Summer, farming the yams and pickles. Olympus DAO was like the greatest invention of all time for a while. For a while. And then I got interested in coming into the space from a builder's perspective before I started my Web 2 software engineering job. And so I was looking at where to build, and essentially I fell in love with this thing called the Appchain thesis, the belief that you could vertically integrate what you're building into the chain itself, and then have this shared underlying infrastructure for all things communication and interoperability. And the only real proponent of that at the time was Cosmos. And so I joined Terra as a smart contract developer, which is a bit of a crazy story. But essentially, I was just there as a smart contract dev, helped build out a few different dApps for the ecosystem. And then I left together with Stanford, so became EIRs, and started our own project that was supposed to launch on the Terra blockchain. Unfortunately, Terra blew up. We never launched that project. But we went back to the drawing board a few months later and essentially started working on Initia from there. I'll let Stan give his catch you up to speed to the timeline as well.
Yeah, sure. So similar to Zan in some sense, not from Canada though, originally from China/Korea, but I went to college in the States, did a degree in pure math, was thinking about going to do pure research, somehow got involved actually in quant trading after college. And so I was on a few different desks across different firms. And then I got involved basically in crypto market making, or like market making on one of the crypto desks. And then at that time, I think like a lot of teams and a lot of places were getting interested in DeFi as well, kind of like integrating different types of protocols, different types of products or chains within their trading strategy. So I was working a lot on that. I didn't really have too much exposure to crypto actually before then, except for maybe like selling RuneScape Gold for BTC and Ethereum, if you guys remember that.
Nice.
Yeah, and then so I got a little bit involved there, got interested in like crypto and Web3 just from like my own personal time within like the ecosystem, the builder system. And so that's where I actually got introduced to Do Kwon through somebody I went to college with, because he went to high school with Do Kwon. And so I had a small chat. It was like a 20-minute chat. And he was like, you want to come join? And then I ended up joining Terra briefly as a engineering researcher as well as a product manager there. Spent some time there, similar to Zan. Eventually spun out to build our own options protocol within Cosmos. And the rest of the story is pretty much similar after then.
Got it. And then when did you guys start thinking about Initia and like, hey, like this could be a thing? Like right after, and like why were you doing like all the IER stuff?
So yeah, there's a brief period where I was thinking about what next to do because we felt that with FTX and everything after, it just wasn't the right move to try and take this previous app we had built and launch it somewhere else. And so I went back to the drawing board in Ethereum, potentially was going to join some projects there. Stan went back to quant finance and quickly realized he can't make it in traditional finance anymore. And then,
it's ruined.
Yeah, we ruined him. And then essentially, we were looking at the way that Cosmos evolved, because even though we were builders there, we spent a lot of time on Ethereum and Ethereum DeFi. And we knew that like Ethereum DeFi was just far greater of an experience. And I think some of the things are interesting because Cosmos SDK was always like this most flexible stack to build something unique. And you have unique projects there. You have things like DYDX V4, Osmosis, Berachain, Celestia, now Story Protocol that all use Cosmos SDK. But it's just difficult to build a Cosmos chain. You have to run a layer 1. You have to have a validator set. You have to deal with like IBC relayers. You have to have a token and inflate it for security. So it's kind of just a pain in the ass to use this flexible stack. Whereas rollups on Ethereum started to become this popular thing of how we're going to scale ETH. But it was essentially appending this scaling framework that was never really meant to scale Ethereum in the first place because it was supposed to be through sharding to this legacy system of Ethereum. And people debate all the time now about are L2s parasitic to the underlying layer 1. And when you launch rollups on Ethereum through like the OP stack or Arbitrum Orbit, you essentially get the exact same copy-paste fork every single time. So you can't change the way that transactions are ordered, how they're processed. All you can really do is play on the Solidity side and maybe change the gas token. And with the modular expansion that was coming, the 10 different interoperability solutions, the 5 different DA layers, like all these Oracle services, we knew that like the clusterfuck of like liquidity fragmentation, as well as all the choice overload that exists in Cosmos and exists in rollups on Ethereum, was only going to get worse and worse over time, because we just fundamentally see scaling blockchains as being through a multi-chain approach over time. And so we said, okay, we know some amazing talent. We have the expertise within Cosmos and Ethereum. We follow this very closely. We can build a complete solution, a layer 1 plus layer 2 system that is basically built together for a rollup centric future to take out all of these pain points and ensure that it is literally the Garden of Eden of multi-chain.
The Garden
And that's
of Eden.
kind of when Initia started to be born and when we started to iterate on the ideas.
Is that a play on your Apple design philosophy?
Yeah, I think like the initial thesis was kind of like everybody uses different applications, right? It's like pretty easy, since me and Zon are pretty heavy Ethereum users. It's like pretty easy to move your assets across different types of applications that are built on the L1 mainnet. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're going to these L2s or moving back and forth, etc. But I think like for the average DeFi native, it's not too bad. But we just wanted to like consider that the specific case where, you know, you're not very tapped into the ecosystem. You don't know where every bridge is. You don't know like where every service lies. You need to like go to DeFi Llama and look at like every specific service, how to access them, etc. Right? Like I think just like the bridging process itself, which is like a very minor problem or like a very small part of the whole user experience, is like extremely confusing, right? Like you have wrapped token standards, you have different types of token standards, you have when you're bridging like different time periods. Like when you go to Arbitrum, are you bridging through the Arbitrum optimistic bridge, or are you bridging through some other bridge like CCTP in some sense? You get different token standards, things like that were like not too hard to handle as somebody who is like pretty familiar with the ecosystem, but it's definitely very difficult for somebody who's like trying to build like, for example, a consumer app or something like that. And so that started was like those kind of problems were basically the basis for our reasoning to build like Initia as an ecosystem.
Yeah, the Apple design philosophy kind of filters from there. The way that I see rollups on Ethereum right now is basically like an Android, right? You get this piece of infrastructure, and then there's so much plug and play of like which service provider you're going to use, which bridge, which Oracle, which DA, how is all this going to come to work? And on Initia, what we did is essentially we are very opinionated about how the system should evolve, right? We have basically a lot of components that are just enshrined into the layer 1 and layer 2 framework. How bridging works only uses IBC in layer 0. We only use Celestia for DA. We have like a native system for oracles, and that also gets relayed to all of these layer 2s. And then a lot of the product experiences as well, we want to be similar across all the layer 2s on Initia, so that slowly over time we can abstract the experience and control basically how users interact with these applications. You want it to be the same across each, so it's very easy for new users. You want how you bridge around each of them to feel and look the same, because you kind of psyops people into believing that like, this is just how I send between applications, even if there's a bunch of bridging being done beneath.
Got it. And so you're basically building with the assumption like, hey, okay, it's a rollup centric future, the Appchain thesis, like we believe in it. Let's make the Appchains that quote unquote aren't like parasitic to the L1. You're thinking like, okay, like how can there be like a balance between the two? Is that like a right way to view it?
Yeah, I think for a lot of like, for example, Ethereum and other cases, you kind of start with the L1, right? And then later on, you get a bunch of these L2s. And this is just like out of like historical reasoning, because L2s came after L1s, right? Whereas we have like the benefit of like looking back into like that type of development of the ecosystem and kind of really considering like, okay, well, the L1 in some sense provides some sort of value to the L2s. The L2s themselves, if they're individual applications, they obviously bring economic value to the L1 itself. How can we tie this into like an economic system that brings value to both users and kind of deletes this argument of whether or not L2s are parasitic to L1s, right? Like make all the applications themselves kind of work in the same direction as like the L1. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about like the economic mechanisms in play, and then specifically like how different applications as well as the users on each of these applications interact with both the L1 and the L2s.
Got it. Kit, what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking let's kind of get down into the brass tacks. Then this is going to be a podcast that I tell all the listeners and viewers, you got to take out your notepad and pencil because we're going to go deep on this one.
Okay.
It's definitely one of those. And I think this is the perfect pod to kind of get into it because, before the recording, I was telling Dave that you guys literally stood on the shoulders of giants and then just turned yourself into a giant because you improved so many of the basic systems. Like you took the best of everything and made it better. So I was super excited to kind of dive into this pod. And, quick shout out to whoever did the docs. Amazing writing skills. Okay. Usually when I see an equation in a doc, I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But these equations were very eloquent and also enough to express exactly what is needed to be understood. I read through it once and I got it. Like that's when I know these are good docs. So let's dive right in here to the overall Initia architecture. Right? Could you walk me through how the Initia's on top, the Initia, the L1, and then also the DA layer, walk me through that stack, please.
Yep. So I think there's 3 main stacks on Initia, and we can go to all of them at some point, which is architecture, product, and economics. So architecture stack we can hop into first. Mm-hmm. So there is an Initia layer 1. It is a Cosmos SDK chain that uses the Move VM. And it has a few interesting characteristics about it. One, it acts as the orchestration layer. So basically handling all security, rewards, interoperability and routing for all the layer 2s on top of Initia. And to do that, there's a few bonus things it has. One is this system called Enshrined Liquidity. This is where we basically built a DEX into the chain itself. And then we built this system called Enshrined Liquidity where we stake initX LP tokens directly with our validators. So things like initETH, initUSDC, initIDEA, whatever we kind of want to exist. And that acts as 1, we're using productive assets to secure the network. 2, it's accessible liquidity for every layer 2. But 3, it acts as a multi-chain router. So if you're moving from USDC on one rollup to ETH on another, that's a prime liquidity venue for those swaps to happen as the tokens are being transferred. Then we have the Interwoven stack. This is basically our optimistic rollup framework. And so it is essentially full-fledged optimistic rollups. They have the optimistic bridge. They have fraud proofs. They have rollbacks. They have challenges that are handled by the layer 1. And essentially it falls very similar to Optimism's Bedrock in terms of how it actually works, but it's obviously built in Cosmos SDK. And then we have Minitias, which are our layer 2 stack. They are full-fledged Cosmos SDK based chains. So you could change everything from the way transactions are ordered. You could have multiple or many types of gas fees. You could change the way that transactions are actually processed as each one of them are happening. And then they're also VM agnostic. So we built EVM, MoveVM, and WASM VM into every one of these layer 2s. And so you can pick whatever smart contract environment works best for you in your application. And then basically everything is just inherited through the L1. So you have access to native USDC and CCTP, layer 0 and IBC, fiat on-ramps, oracles that are enshrined into the chain, and the layer 1 validator set basically posts fresh prices every single block, and those get relayed to each of these layer 2s. And basically, all you need to worry about building is your actual application. So that's the gist of the architecture stack. And then, of course, every one of these layer 2s just posts DA to Celestia by default.
Right. And then they post the proofs onto Initia L1.
Yes.
Is that right?
So the Initia L1 is where the settlement layer is. So that's where the optimistic bridge ends up. So if you're bridging through the optimistic bridge or doing withdrawals, those would go to the Initia layer 1. And then basically just blob data is posted to the L2s. And we've built this really cool state sync feature where if there was a fraud proof challenge, we can essentially just read the data from Celestia and create a fork instance of the chain up to a certain time period.
So you just launch another Minitia, and have everyone just move over, and that chain just dies off.
Yep.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay. And so two things I want to dive into is first is the Enshrined liquidity and how it acts as almost this router and bridge both at the same time. Let's say a user is on, Minitia A and they want to get onto Minitia B and they want to transfer USDC, as simple as that. So they have to first go from USDC in Minitia's A's with the init pair and then come onto the mainnet, come into L1 again, and then swap into init USDC of Minitia B and then to go into the Minitia B? Like, is there like multiple init USDC A, init USDC B to allocate to each of these different Minitias?
Yeah, so the answer is no. We basically wanted to remove some of the fragmentation of like liquidity when there's like different types of USDC, right? Point. Like we saw the case in a lot of L1s where there's like USDC.E, like WHUSDC, WUSDC, etc. So we want to remove that kind of like fragmentation. And so what we do is when we have token movement between different Minitias themselves, we always enforce it that they move through the L1. And so what happens in this case is that basically the USDC on one Minitia has the same standard as the USDC on another Minitia itself. So these are all forms of native USDC. And so we enforce a similar hierarchy or architecture, similar to like Noble, how when Noble issues USDC and it goes to like Osmosis or whatever, and you want to send it from Osmosis to, let's say, DYDX or wherever else, it always passes through Noble. And then it resends to DYDX or whatever the destination chain is. And so we follow that kind of standard.
Got it. So
wait, hold on. Is Zan being...
Okay, Stan. So I understand that it's the same USDC and it's not a bunch of different pools because that defeats the purpose. What I'm still hung up on is when a user first acquired that USDC, they acquired it from this init USDC pool. After they take this USDC, it leaves the pool, right? Because they have to use it on the Minitia A to do whatever they want to do. And then when they come back out onto the L1, they basically, and because they want to go to Minitia B, they basically put that USDC back into the pool and then we re-withdraw it again on Minitia B. Is that how I kind of see it? So, yeah.
So if let's say you're first entering into the Initia ecosystem through the L1, right? And you have like init, let's say you bought it off an exchange and withdrawing it. You can swap on the DEX, on the L1 native DEX and get USDC, right? So now you have USDC in your wallet balance. In order to use it on this L2 application, you need to physically move these USDCs onto the L2 or like the Minitia itself. And like, obviously this is like the more technical explanation, right? Like on the user's perspective, like this is all abstracted away with regards to the bridging and everything. And so let's say you're on this L2 and you're using the USDC and then you're done, right? Let's say you're done trading, you got liquidated and you're like, I'm done with this shit. And now you want to go back, I'm just going to go back to a lending protocol or something like that, which is on a different L2, right? So what happens is you need to bridge that USDC that was on the trading protocol, the trading L2, down back to the L1, right? And you still have that balance. Now it's just on the L1 layer. Once that balance is on the L1 layer and confirmed, then you just need to send it back up to the other L2, right? So like you don't do any swaps in the second part. It's just two simple token transfers.
Understood. Okay, gotcha. I thought I had to swap to bridge. Yeah.
No swapping to bridge. But
got it.
You all that experience is like abstracted through all of the product features that we've built. So you can just say like I'm moving from one L2 to another L2. And all the packets will just be automatically forwarded. So you don't have to deal with it. Yeah.
Great.
Go ahead.
I just want to ask about the fees and come to this. Are you guys thinking, since it's such a vital pool that people are smashing into, are you thinking of like extremely low fee? Because no one else is going to be able to compete against this init USDC pool. You know what I mean? It's not like you can have like one on Uniswap and one on like another one. Like it just won't. It's just be this one pool that is the mother pool. Right.
Yeah, we'll probably have low fees or like standard fees. We definitely want some of the swaps to like accrue value back to the stakers. But the majority of the way that staking pool probably makes money is like we have the staking rewards that a typical L1 would give that are being distributed to that pool.
Great. And Dave, before I hand it over to you, the last bit of they mentioned is about rollbacks and fraud proofs, right? I've usually associate these two concepts independent of each other, because if you could do a fraud proof and challenge it, you wouldn't need to roll it back, right? It must have been like, oh, you missed that challenge window, and then you really have to roll it back. So could you kind of walk me through, like, well, first explain to the audience, like, what is a fraud proof? Why is it important? And then how does a rollback play as like the final fail-safe?
Yep. So essentially, how optimistic rollups work, right, is we optimistically assume that everything was fine. Like the sequencers operated fine. Everyone's being an honest actor. And so that's why they have these challenge windows, which is essentially like if there was fraud that happened on a layer 2, like one of the sequencers put in some malicious transactions that they front ran a bunch of people, or they like tried to shift balances or something like that. If they tried to then withdraw to the L1, it would technically take 7 days, right? And so in that time frame, one honest actor just needs to come and submit a fraud proof saying, look, this is the sequencer. They acted maliciously. We need to stop this withdrawal to the layer 1. And then we need to roll back the chain to essentially reset the state. And so that's kind of how that works. One of the things that we built, though, on Initia is we don't want bridging to take 7 days, obviously. It would be it would defeat the purpose of an interwoven world, right? If you can't send from L2 to L2 easily.
Correct.
And so we built this crazy system called MinitiaSwap, which essentially allows people to do this instant bridging of optimistic rollup tokens with some bounded amounts of potential like losses. That is very different from like losing all of your balances, but it is like slightly bounded. But that is super complicated. I don't know if Stan wants to go into it.
Yeah, let's go into it.
We want to go
sounds
into
good.
it.
So if you kind of think about, I guess, using an optimistic bridge, right? What actually happens is like when you send a token from the base L1 to the L2, what happens is you're actually sending it through the optimistic bridge, but those tokens are actually locked still on the L1 itself. What happens from there is basically the tokens are, in some sense, minted again on the L2. So they're technically two different tokens because the L1 tokens are still locked in the token bridge contract. And what happens is, like, when you do want to withdraw, after that 7 days, like the tokens on the L2 are burned and then they're released on the L1. What we do instead is we have two bridging solutions. One is like the Cosmos native IBC, right? And then the second is the optimistic bridge. Once you move your tokens up through the optimistic bridge, they need 7 days in normal circumstances. What we do instead is actually we take those new L2 minted tokens in some sense, and then we bridge them back down through IBC. And IBC is instantaneous. What happens is when you go through the optimistic bridge up and then come down through the IBC, you actually get a different token than what you originally sent, right? So like if you sent, for example, let's say USDC from the L1 up to the L2, that's also USDC, right? But through the optimistic bridge, and you take that token and you send it down back to the L1 through IBC, you get like an IBC wrapped version of the optimistic bridged USDC, right? So they're technically, you could like reverse this path and get your USDC again, but it's like difficult. You need to wait 7 days, but they're technically two different tokens. So what we basically did is like, okay, let's make a swap between these two since these are on the L1. Like both of these tokens, they're different in some sense. They're same in some other sense. Let's make it a swap, right? You know, make it almost one-to-one in some sense, like a stable swap, right? Obviously pay us a little bit of a fee to not deal with this 7-day bridging period. And so users are quickly able to exit out through this type of mechanisms called MinitiaSwap. And we do this, for example, for USDC on the L1, USDC on, like, let's say Minitia A, USDC on Minitia B, and we make like a pair that has multiple of these tokens. And so any user that wants to utilize this liquidity is able to do so. And as Zon mentioned with like the time bounded or like volume bounded thing, basically like the total amount of USDC that can be swapped back to the native version on the L1, there's just like a limit over a specific amount of time. And then there's the recovery period. And after that small window is open, you can swap a little bit more. And so the rates change based on how much is being swapped at any given time. So if a lot of people are trying to swap back into native USDC, you expect worse rates, right? On the opposite side, if you're like that dude that's trying to like arb this in some sense and be like, oh, I'll give you all my native L1 USDC and I'm going to move it up to the L2 and I'll wait this 7 days, then you might get a little bit more USDC, right? You get a rate that's better than 1-to-1.
Got it. Okay. And that is, okay, first of all, thank you for explaining it like that. I totally get it. Dave, are you good with that explanation?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Right. It's very clean. And one thing about the different Minitia IBC wrapped USDC, they're all different, but they all come into the same pool because
Correct.
they all have to take this 7-day execute, right? So the exit door is the same. Therefore, every single token is treated the same because they all have to wait this 7 days to come back onto mainnet. That's why you're able to batch them all into one pool.
To be super, like, I guess, accurate, the exit
Yes,
door
be super accurate.
all look the same, but they're actually different, right? Because each individual Minitia themselves has a separate optimistic bridge. But like the process is the same, right? You go IBC up back to the specific L2, you wait 7 days and withdraw from the OP bridge contract.
Got it. And the rollback element and also the volume or time bound is just to make sure that, you know, there isn't a chance where there is a malicious act there and there's no way to call it back because, you allowed for this fast track. And then if everybody takes the fast track and then nothing is left, then someone's left holding the bag of like, tokens that are not worth anything. Hence you have to show it. Oh, okay. Okay. So I see why both of these are needed.
Yeah. So they're like liquidity providers that facilitate this kind of fast swapping, right? And we want to bound the amount of loss that they can incur at any fixed point in time. And so that's why there's like this like rate limiting mechanism.
Wow. Very cool. All right. Dave, hand it over to you.
I was going to ask, I know you guys are Appchain L2 centric here, but do you expect people to build on the L1? Can you build on the L1? Or are you like, nah, fuck that. Go to the L2?
Yeah, so we believe that people will build wherever they want. You can build move smart contracts on the L1, but we try and push every team to be their own standalone L2. I think that way you can just optimize your experience. You can optimize like having your own block space, ensuring there's going to be no congestion. And that's like how the system scales, right? You push all of the execution to these individual layer 2s. And then you make sure that they're all interwoven so that you don't have to deal with any of the garbage user experience of it actually being multiple different chains.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you said you guys support EVM, Move, WASM, but I didn't hear SVM in there. I'm curious, like, why isn't SVM in there?
Yeah, so I have the belief, okay, I could be wrong. Like it all kind of depends on like market demands. If people are like, we want to build SVM L2s, yeah, we'll look into building it for sure. But the thing is, I think people build in SVM because they want to build on Solana. It's like, I like Solana, I like the community, I like the liquidity, and I like the users. It's not like the SVM is this next generation smart contracting framework.
Yeah.
Like, I think if that was your solution, then you would go to Move or Cosmosm.
Okay, got it.
And essentially, one of the important parts is that for each of these VMs we build, we have to build them in a specific way because they have to integrate with the Cosmos SDK side underneath very well. So in past history, things like Ethermint and Evmos, like EVMs on Cosmos were just a pain in the ass. And that's because bridging between like an ERC20 token and a Cosmos native token was not done very seamlessly. And so it was basically like two distinct layers where you could have tokens on the Cosmos side and you could have tokens on the EVM side, and these were different. And that's like going to cause a huge UX problem. And so when we built all of these VMs on top of Cosmos SDK, we basically merged that part. So you can take an ERC20 and you can just IBC it out. It'll convert naturally into a Cosmos coin. And then if, for example, you send it to a Move layer 2, it'll be converted into a Move fungible asset, which is their coin. And if you send that Move fungible asset to a Cosmosm chain, it'll automatically convert into a Cosmosm 20 token. So you are basically creating this seamless interaction between the VMs and the Cosmos side, and then using the Cosmos side for all the bridging.
Got it. Now I want to make our way up, not be so technical anymore, get up to the app chains. I'm curious, what are the app chains that are being built with Initia, on Initia? And how are you incubating these projects? How are you, I'll let you guys answer.
Yeah, so essentially we have a few beliefs. One is just reflecting on some of the layer one launches that happened in the past year or two. Right? I think there's two things that they often did wrong. One was saying we have like 100 projects or like 50, like even 50 projects. That's a lot of projects, right? And typically what happens is this chain launches and then they all turn out to be Uni v2 forks or like little hackathon projects that like no one ever takes and like continues to work on over time. And I think that is just a failed approach that we've seen again and again and again. The second is bringing over projects from existing ecosystems and like canonicalizing them. So for example, teams brought over like Pancake or SushiSwap. And all that did was cannibalize the native ecosystem, drives users in TVL into something like PancakeSwap. But those users aren't going to have a successful outcome, likely farming like cake tokens. But if the foundation and the team like dedicated resources to helping this native application win, they might have the opportunity for wealth effects to exist there. And I think that's critical to building a new ecosystem. Like in crypto, ultimately, like creating these wealth effects is how you build these long-standing communities and create like a thriving ecosystem. And so the way that we do that is by finding teams that are trying to build something unique, new, and interesting to have a reason to actually come use this product. And secondly, are building for the long term and native so that we can give our full resources to supporting them, whether that be on like marketing, financial incentives, product, like smart contracts, anything. Like the entire goal of Initia is to build this infrastructure stack so layer 2 teams can win. The entire point of all of our product is like to abstract all that infra away so we can just focus on these really cool applications. So some of the ones that we're working with are, there's one called Blackwing. They essentially allow for perpetual trading on any coin with liquidity on any chain. So if there is a coin that makes it off of Pump Fund and is now on Radium, I can now go long short on it. If there's a coin on Thrust or on Blast, I can go long short on it. If there's something on Osmosis or another Minitia, like I can trade them all as long as there is a liquidity pair, and the entire like feeling of having to bridge around and go trade and use all these different wallets is just abstracted because they use their layer 2 as this essentially like this intent hub. So you go submit orders there. They have this solver network that goes out and facilitates these trades. And then when you close them, it all comes back. And they use this limitless pools design, which essentially allows you to collateralize these LP tokens and then perform leverage on them. And that I think is like literally the perfect application for the meme coin cycle that we're in right now. Another very cool one is Milky Way. They were the first LST on top of Tia and Celestia that is now building a restaking hub as an initial layer 2. And so they have basically gone and talked to like all the operators, talked to everyone that uses like Eigenlayer and Symbiotic, altered a lot of the design principles to build like a much better restaking solution. And then I think in Cosmos land and in modular land is the perfect place where there's all these different little pieces and moving parts that actually need additional economic security. Like L2s on Ethereum, yeah, they're fine. I don't think we need billions of dollars of ETH stake to secure them. But there is a very compelling reason that this sovereign rollup on Celestia or this IBC relayer or any of these things in Cosmos land essentially need that additional security because they don't inherit ETH's security. Some other cool ones are we have a couple of on-chain games. So Civicia is basically building a perpetual on-chain kind of monopoly game where you can come basically and anyone can join like as many people as possible. And you can roll dice and you can basically land on houses and buy them. But when you buy them, you get automatically added to a group chat with everyone else that also owns that land. And then what you need to do is basically, as you're playing the game, strategize with your group to either like strengthen your land together or sabotage other lands. And I think that is just pretty phenomenal. There's another game that we are also working with called Kamigachi. It's an idle RPG game. it's just super cute and really fun. And they're already live on testnet as well. A few others that I can dive into is there's one called Contro. Okay, this one's pretty cracked, not gonna lie.
Let's hear it.
They built this thing called the Glob.
The Glob.
The Glob, which is an incredible name. And it stands for the Gradual Limit Order Book. And basically there's this researcher, and he's been working on this for 2 years. And what it does is it slows down the times of markets within order books, and specifically built for prediction markets, which is like very relevant right now. Mm-hmm. And why removing the time element of prediction markets is important is because front running is a huge problem. Right now, like Polymarkets and these other things basically use like Uniswap V2 pools, right? So there's liquidity on both sides. If someone finds out information like a split second sooner than someone else, they could snipe the entire pool and like remove the remaining possible outcomes for anyone else that wants to bet this way. But the Glob removes that time element. And so all you have to be is directionally correct when coming to make your bet. And if you're within a similar time frame, and it's up to like that individual pool, you can still have like a positive outcome as long as you are directionally correct with your bet.
Does that mean like instead of one person like swooping up like all the yeses or nos, it's like one person comes in, but let's say like within a day, like, you know, somebody else comes in, like 10 other people come in, and then in that like amount of time, the market resolves, and then like those 10 people share it equally? So
they don't share it equally. So basically, if the first person comes in on day one, right, they put their order in, it starts trickling in to buys, like slowly. And then if someone comes in later, there's
like
also
trickling in.
It's basically like a TWAM. And so everyone's that's directionally correct within the time frame, they have their bets start to trickle in, and so that they can ensure that they're sharing part of the profit.
It's like an order book, but in slow motion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And obviously these TWAMs are not very publicly broadcasted, right? Because if I see a large TWAM order comes in, I'm like, well, let me just, try
like,
to
how do they hide
follow
those?
this guy.
Yeah. I wonder like how you hide those.
I assume on chain you can't really hide it.
Yeah.
But at least if you see this
yeah.
large person come in, you can be like, wow, okay, I'm going to also do that.
Yeah, it's compensating.
Yeah. Gain. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw there was this other. I mean, we're going off a tangent, but this other service that I saw was basically automating like all the TWAP. I forgot, was it on Jupiter or one of the perp dexes, and they were saying how instead of just having a public order where everyone can see all the TWAMs that's going on, it actually submits an order for you randomly, schizo. Like it just randomly submits your TWAM for you so that no one can tell that this is a part of a TWAM order, but it's all like handled off chain. Yes, you do have to give permissions and everything to the software, but there is that done for you. So, there's there. But I want to go back, Zon and Stan, for a second. You said, you want to make sure not copycat projects come on. So is Initia not permissionless?
No, so
Yeah,
we
go for it.
are completely permissionless, and that means you can spin up whatever you want on the L1 itself. If you want to do an L1, you can spin up your own L2 if you want, and customize it any way you like. When we say we just want projects that are not, let's say the goal of this is to have interesting projects that kind of serve as pillars of your ecosystem early on, right? So if you look at a lot of the early ecosystems, like in Arbitrum, they did really well because they had specific projects like GMX, right? And then everybody started building around GMX, wrappers around GLP, right? Like there's like GNP and like a bunch of these other things.
Sure.
Similarly on like Optimism, like Velodrome and some of these other protocols and like synthetics, right? Similarly, we want to do something, I guess, like in a similar manner, right? Like new interesting projects where people can actually take part in the growth of the project itself, rather than just like your typical low hanging fruit, like a Uniswap 2 fork or something like that. But that being said, if somebody does want to do that, they're completely open to doing so as well. It's completely permissionless in this.
Got it. But you guys just won't like support them on like the ton of marketing side and all like resources towards that. Is that the distinction between like an app that you would want as a pillar?
We'll try and support any project that builds on Initia. And like when we dive into VIP, you'll see that it's like a very egalitarian system.
Perfect.
But
it is.
When we're thinking about day one, Like you want Genesis, which is one of your highest attention periods, to be filled with reasons to actually come use this product. And the way to do that is by having novel, interesting, new things. And so our focus before mainnet has basically been helping to cultivate awesome teams that are building on the Interwoven stack.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I have another BD question. It sounds like the BD strategy here is twofold. It's like one, cultivating these projects, and two, attracting users to these projects and Appchains and stuff. I'm curious, like how you guys are thinking about attracting users. It's not like you're attracting users to the L1. It's like, oh, like it's for like each Appchain themselves. It's like, so do you guys like work with the Appchains individually? Like how do you guys take more of a holistic approach?
Yeah, so we work with the Appchains all individually, of course. I think, like as we said, like the point of this infrastructure is to help layer 2 teams win. So whatever we can do to help them attract more users and more TVL and like value additive things, we're going to do. But what's beneficial about this interwoven world is that there's a lot of network effects. Every new Minitia that comes into play is like another one that you can very easily tap into. And so once you have this like base ecosystem, there's a lot of coordination that can be done to cross-pollinate users. And because it's so easy to move assets and users and around this system, it makes it super easy to basically work together to grow the pie rather than fighting for yourself. And so the way that I see rollups on Ethereum and rollups or just like Cosmos chains right now is basically they all fight alone. Everyone has to go out and just try winning themselves. But on Initia, I like to think it's a bit more interwoven. Like everyone cares a little bit about each other as well as the growth of Initia as a whole. And so together we can win.
How'd you choose the name Interwoven? I see that all over your docs.
I thought it was just a very useful word to describe both the tech stack, but also like the ecosystem, right? Like these chains, every time you launch a Minitia, they are connected to everything, whether that be through layer 0, IBC, CCTP, like Oracle data, it's just all there. So you can onboard from literally any chain right when you launch. And so that's interwoven. And you can also connect with like any of the other Minitias, of course. And then on the ecosystem side, it's like I was saying, everyone likes to work together and help grow the pie together. So it might be, it's a nice interwoven world.
Got it. And is there any possibility to have a permissioned, like I don't want to interact with this specific app because I know this app is used for other services or, you know, is used this to buy a not safe for work NFTs and I want to make sure my chain is clean. Like, can you put these kind of gate permissions on?
Yeah,
you can.
So through Cosmos, I guess SDK as well as like the general framework, you're able to do things like semi-permission or like completely permissioned.
Wow.
So for example, like I believe in Osmosis, you can't just deploy your own application, right? It's kind of like they want to keep a chain where it's just like a suite of financial applications. So you could do something like that as well. You could also do certain things as an Minitia operator, such as like allowing which tokens can be passed through the OP bridge, right? So you could set it as like maybe only init and USDC and like my native token or whatever token. Maybe you just don't like, I don't know, Ethereum, or maybe you don't like Solana. You're like, no, there's none coming to my chain. You could do something like that as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's like completely customizable in that sense, as if you were just building your own Cosmos app chain.
Great. All right, cool. Thank you. Go ahead, Son.
I was just going to say that right now we've announced 12 Minitias that are building on the interwoven stack. And what's pretty interesting, I think, and I just want to shill a bit, is that most of them are native and they've raised over 13.5 million, like just in aggregate, which is pretty phenomenal for an ecosystem that when we ourselves have not raised that much, right? Like I think it shows a bit of testament to like the usefulness and the product market fit for like this type of system and the need. And when you compare it to other ecosystems that have raised like hundreds of millions of dollars, they also have a similar level of ecosystem investments. So it is pretty cool.
That's a great position to be in.
Yeah. I didn't realize you guys raised less. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty sick.
Yeah, no,
We're trying to be a lot more community aligned as well. Like over the past year, we've seen all of these high float, low FDV infrastructure projects launch super high and then basically bleed out over time. And we kind of want to be the opposite of that. I think like the way that a lot of ecosystems have succeeded is like they have grown over time with their ecosystem and with their community and created some of these wealth effects. And so we plan to basically try and be the opposite of that, right? Like let community buy in, let people buy in near the same prices as institutionals, let people ride the wave as we grow over time. Obviously, this is NFA and we don't have a lot of control over the price, but like that's our intended goal.
Cool. And
I think
that's
so important. Yeah, no, I think that's so.
Go ahead.
It's such an important element. Like you want to create the wealth effects for everyone. Like that's how any ecosystem achieves long term. Like you see it over and over again. If you just have like a part of like the ecosystem, like oh, like they do well early and then they dump and they like fuck off and then the chain goes to rot. Like what good is it? Like the real successful chains is like everyone wins together long term.
Yeah, I think it's basically a look of like how far out are you thinking and how long do you want to be working on this project and how successful do you think you're going to be? Like I think the high FDV launches have a lot of compelling reasons, right? Like people have their grants, which are worth a lot more. Their ecosystem incentives are worth a lot more. Maybe they cheat some of the foundation supply, which a lot of teams have like day one. Right now they have this massive treasury. But then you bleed out and basically it's like it's over from day one. I would hate for that to happen to our ecosystem. And so I'd rather play the game on hard mode and like try and actually win in the long term.
Respect.
Instead of low FTV, it's low expectation.
Yeah.
Please have good expectations.
Rephrase that. Yeah, rephrase that a bit. That came out wrong. Yeah. But Zon, before in the beginning of this, you talked about the architecture, the product, and the economics, right? I want to get into the economics because that's where the meat of it is. But I think we need to talk about the product, how you guys have a block explorer for literally all the chains in one, which is a godsend. Try using Cosmos. Like just
there's a lot of things that we've done on product because we're big Ethereum ecosystem users and we want to lower as many barriers as possible for interacting with any of the Minitias. So two major features that we did, or three or four actually, is one, we built the Initia app, which is kind of like this home ground for all things to do within Initia. It's like a super app. It's where you can go to do all the Enshrined liquidity stuff. It's also where you can go to explore all of the Minitias that exist. The second is we built this wallet widget. It allows you to connect any EVM wallet, Cosmos wallet, or in-app wallets directly to any of these Minitias, even if they're in a different VM. So if it's a Move VM or a Cosmosm VM layer 2, you can still connect your Rabby wallet and sign with that, which is great because I only use Rabby. Same. And then we built this bridge widget that aggregates all the flows between Minitias and external chains and CCTP and everything else. And that's because it is like the worst experience having to tell someone, go use this one front end built by an external team to bridge to the initial layer 1, then go use our front end to bridge to this layer 2. And we kind of just want to make that seamless so that these teams on the Interwoven stack can just be like, come from Ethereum directly into our rollup and start interacting with it. You don't even need to know that Initia is underneath.
Yep. And you don't have to go through 3 block explorers just to crack your bridge.
And then, yes, we recently acquired Celatone, which is like the best damn block explorer in Cosmos. It actually powers Sayscan, Osmosis's block explorer, Neutron's block explorer, and Terra's. And now they power basically all of the Minitias and all of their block explorers, as well as the Initia layer 1. And it is like very robust. You can do all sorts of smart contract interactions across the 3 VM. You can like verify smart contract code. You can see all your transactions and balances very easily. So really just putting an emphasis on how can we make this as simple as possible. And what's also cool about the bridge widget is that it can also do swaps, right? So using Enshrined liquidity at the core, if you're moving from USDC on one rollup to ETH on another, that'll just all be facilitated through that little widget.
And what do you guys call the bridge widget?
Bridget.
Just had to get that on camera. Okay, great. I love that you guys have a comprehensive, product suite, just so that, for a developer and for the end users. Like I noticed that in your docs as well is how you guys care about both sides of that equation, which is really helpful. And none other than it's more obvious is how you guys design your economics and how you care about both the developers and the end user. Could you dive into your VIP programs, please?
Yeah, so I guess like this kind of can be segue from what we were talking about. We want to get basically community buy-in to the rest of the ecosystem and the success of, let's say, Initia as a project itself, right? I think like the most direct way of kind of seeing the success of a product in a lot of people's minds, and I don't think it's the correct way of saying it, is price in some sense, or like my exposure to like Solana, or like my exposure to the ecosystem, right? And we realize like in Web3, a lot of things are hyper financialized, and a lot of this actually helps build community. So we do want to get it in the hands of users. And that was basically the initial like starting point when we developed something that we called VIP, which is called Vested Interest Program. And so what we do is for all these Minitias, we actually have so on the L1, there's a specific portion of the initial token supply that is allocated to Minitia users. And so what this means is that users who use different applications on Minitias, whether it's like a perp platform, it's a lending protocol, I don't know, like Civicia or whatever, based on certain KPI that's defined by the Minitia operators themselves, users are actually allocated Initia token rewards. These token rewards are given in the form of ES init or escrowed init. And so they're not immediately transferable or sellable in that sense. Users are able to vest these tokens over, let's say, 26 weeks in a linear fashion by maintaining their activities on the specific Minitia that they receive these rewards for. So for example, if I was really active in being a slumlord on Civicia, in order to basically unlock some of my ES inits over time, I got to make sure that I'm keeping my slumlord status, right? Or like maybe I was the top trader on Blackwing, right? And I'm doing a lot of volume in some sense, and Blackwing believes that volume is the best metric for their users. Then I need to maintain some portion of that volume across these 26 weeks. And so what this kind of results in is a KPI-based like rewards program or incentives program, right? Users are able to get incentives for maintaining their activity. It's kind of like a little bonus from the Minitia operator's point of view as well. Like if they don't even have a native token, they still have rewards that they can give to their users, right? And we also like kind of remove this problem of like, let's say some of these grant programs and other L1s, where basically the grants are given to the teams, but the teams never end up giving it to their users, right? It just goes in the treasury and kind of disappears in a black hole. And we think like that's the wrong approach, right? We want to remove the middleman. I think like that's kind of like the hypothesis here, making sure that all the rewards end up to the end users. But at the same time, right, like you kind of have to acknowledge that, okay, Blackwing or Civicia built a really killer application, right? They brought all these users to the L1, brought a lot of economic value. They should be benefiting off this as well. And so what actually these applications can do is similar to validators, they take a portion of that commission as commission. So for example, maybe 5% of the rewards or like 10% of the rewards. And so basically you kind of align the incentives across all the participants. The Minitia operators or the app developers themselves, they want to build a really kick-ass app, make users really active, a lot of volume, a lot of, let's say, init balances on the L2s themselves. That drives a lot more rewards to the end users themselves. And then the Minitia operators themselves are able to take a small cut of this. From the L1's perspective, it's like very good in the sense that like, oh, there's like a lot of init usage on the L2s themselves. Like these L2 applications themselves are incentivized through the VIP program to incorporate init into their application, whether it's like init trading or like maybe init as like the base currency or like init in some other like novel way. And so rather than like the L1 saying like, you need to use init as collateral or you need to use init as like in some specific shape or form, we leave it up to the Minitia teams themselves to kind of like find ways to incorporate that within their application, right? Because we obviously believe that the application developers themselves are the most familiar with like the mechanisms as well as the economics of their application. So I guess like that's a short summary of the VIP
I think you
program.
described the distribution and the unlocking, but the allocation is also important, like how much of these VIP rewards are allocated to each Minitia. And that's basically done through two things. One is there are these 26 epochs in a year. And each epoch, we look at two things when distributing these rewards. One is the amount of init balances on each layer 2. And the reason we do that is basically to incentivize new novel use cases of the init token within them. And the second is a gauge vote that's held on the layer 1. So Enshrined liquidity stakers or just init stakers themselves essentially vote every 2 weeks on which layer 2 they want to allocate these rewards to. And this also helps make governance useful. Like, no one cares about governance on Cosmos chains. Like, I don't care about these upgrades or that upgrades, but like, here's an actual reason to have stake in the underlying layer 1 and like care about what's happening consistently so that we can ensure that these VIP rewards are getting allocated to us. And in this way, we can like help attract additional users to all of these layer 2s, as well as encourage them to stick around over time because you have to keep using things over time.
Yeah, I think that's a very key point. And if I may summarize here, and please stop me and correct me if I'm wrong. And the way I see the init VIP program system works is there are 2 buckets of rewards. One is called the balancer pool and the other is called a weight pool. The balancer pool is just what Zon had described, takes a look at what is the init balance across all of these minitias and then allocate rewards based on their balances respectively. What's interesting though is, like Stan was saying, you guys don't set the KPIs of each of these minitias, right? Each minitia decides how they want to allocate these rewards. But what is great is that they don't have this, it doesn't go into this black box treasury and then I'll distribute it later. No, it's already preset. Everybody knows the rules of the game and it will be distributed based on all these epochs. All right. And now, not only that though, there is the ES in it. So the users doesn't just get, you don't just get to be like a super user one day, farm the hell out of it and then leave. No, you actually have to maintain your super user status. And that's what the scoring system comes through. And then the tokens is then vested over each of these, stages or periods, as they're called. And what's unique though is as you use it though, you earn a new score every single time. So then that score kind of gets carried over, and then based on whatever the presetting of the Minitia operator is, like you get to earn your balance over and over and over and over again. So that
some might call that a flywheel.
Oh,
take a shot. Yeah, take a shot.
Word out of my mouth.
Yes. And now what's crazy though is, instead of just having to, be a super user, let's say you don't want to and you just want to be done with it, there's also the zapping function where you could take the ES init and then just pair it with another token and actually use it as like a liquidity pool, which I thought is super clever because you just force the user to put in new tokens to pair it against this ES. I literally laughed out loud to myself alone in this room as I read it. I was like, oh my God, that's so clever. You just forced them. You really want this in it. You got to take it. So that is now, instead of having to be a super user all the time, you can just take your token all right away, but it's still locked. It's basically a locked LP token to provide liquidity and get the yield, and etc.
Enshrined liquidity. So you're also earning staking rewards and you're also securing the network. So it's value accretive in both cases. Either you keep using applications, which is great for the ecosystem and for the L1, or you're providing liquidity and security.
Yep. Beautiful. And then that obviously has its own vesting schedule as well too, because the locked init has to become unlocked, right? Now that is one leg. Now the other leg, and I think you guys even gave credit to, this is basically the curve system at a chain level, right? You now have a weight pool, and this weight pool is just distributed just like how like the curve gauge weights are done, right? Every init token holder or staker or LP provider, in the enshrined liquidity can now vote on each Minitia as if they were a gauge. Then the token is now distributed that way. Very simple, very clean. I don't think there's any vesting done on this one, right?
It's basically so close. So basically there's the balance pool and the weight pool. You come to get the balances, right? Based on the Minitias. Now you have some escrowed init allocated. Then there's the weight pool, which is the gauge voting. Now you also have some escrowed init allocated. And then you have the KPI system that's like, keep using this or put it into Enshrined liquidity. But basically the weight pool and the balance pool decide how much escrowed init is on each layer 2. And then you have the KPIs for the distribution and the unlocking.
Got it. Okay, so the KPI and the zapping and all of that mechanic is the same in both pools.
Correct.
Okay, cool. I didn't get that when I was reading the docs, so thank you for the clarification there. And then, what is so beautiful about this economic system is you're not just rewarding the pool with the largest stake in it, right? Just like how most POS system is, you literally give the largest staker the most rewards for their time, which is not very fair, right? They could be doing nothing to help the base chain or helping like all the other ecosystem at large, but they get the biggest reward. Now on the other side, you don't just want to allocate. For example, in Curve, one of the largest pool, like the 3 pool, for example, do not get enough emissions that is equivalent to their TVL contribution to the overall pie, right? That's also not okay because, well, all these guys LP'd into the biggest pool, provided like the biggest thing that everyone smashes on, but they get like peanuts because no one wants to incentivize this pool. So you don't want that either. So this new system, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, is how you guys are already standing on the shoulders of giants, and then you just you made it better, right? So I just want to give you guys flowers here because I think this is one of the most unique designs I've seen.
Thank you. Yeah, we think it's the secret sauce of Initia.
There it is.
Yeah, I think like as a user, like when I've been doing this shit for a while, like what I look for is novel applications, like things that get me excited and make me like want to use the chain. And I feel like when I was like thinking back on like what you're saying about all these app chains that you're building, it's like I actually kind of want to try out this monopoly thing. I want to try out this like gradual prediction market. Like those actually sound like quite enticing to me because I feel like when you have the same fork over and over again, people just kind of just get jaded. And we've seen that. And I feel like we've been in this kind of phase of being jaded for a while. And like people are just like waiting for something new. And you guys are basically taking care of like all the tech. Like we went deep in this episode, obviously, but you guys are taking care of all of the tech so that innovation at the app chain level with users can actually happen.
Yeah, most people don't need to iterate on the chain. Like that's a waste of time. Just focus on building a really cool app, and then we kind of take care of everything else.
Because you guys solve for it. It's not that it was a given, in many other ecosystems, it's not like you got to worry about the chain.
It's basically like a culmination of like kind of like all your experiences as a builder, as a user. You're on Cosmos, building on Cosmos, using Ethereum, and you're just like, damn, like let's like Kid, as you just said, like let's just take the best and like the most useful parts of like each ecosystem and like put it together and make it easy to build app chains and whatnot.
Yeah, what I like a lot is that we're not like trying to create this new framework. We're not going to like make you use some new bridging standard. We're not going to make you use some like new mechanism for how you build the chains. Like there are these long-standing great systems like Cosmos SDK, like these VMs, like IBC, and we are somewhat gluing them together in the way that we think they should have been done from the beginning. And obviously we have the benefit of hindsight, but that's allowed us to like build this unique interwoven world.
Yeah. One last question I want to get to is your memetic and communication strategy, and like how you guys use memes, because I've been loving what I'm seeing on the timeline. You guys have the legend Hirsch on board, so I'm curious, like what's your thinking behind memes and communications and spreading Initia out there?
Yeah, so I think I might have different thoughts from Zahn, but I think it's just funny, right? Like it's just interesting to see these kind of things on your timeline, like every once in a week or so, and just being like a team that is actively engaged with your community, right? Like I think if it's the same thing over and over again, it can be a little bit, tiring or like a little bit annoying in some sense. But we try to keep it, a little bit Initia focused, edit the images a little bit, or Hirsch edits the images a little bit. So that's always like related and on theme. But yeah, I think it's just like a refresher because like if you saw on like Twitter or like whichever type of content, all you see is just like 50 pages of words every single day. I don't think you're going to read all those threads, right? And so it's just like good to have like Hirsch and the team to interact with the rest of the community.
Dude, he's a legend. I can't repeat his Twitter handle on this podcast.
Titty respecter. I will.
Thank you, Dave. Respect. But that guy's a legend for sure. I think, yeah, basically community and like marketing are just huge parts of crypto and grabbing attention. And aside from having these interesting products, you want people to also like care about Initia as a whole. And it should be like a huge part of what we do every day, right? Like caring about the community, caring about our users, like talking to them, seeing what feedback we need to iterate on, and then building the best product for them so that we can all win over time.
Amen to that. And before we go, we always like to ask for a question, like a lightning round question. Well, now it's just one question. It's funny how that evolved over time, Kit.
Yep.
But yeah, so what we want to ask is, who do you want to see on Flywheel? Who would you recommend as a guest? And each of you guys can go. So Stan, go first.
Ooh, I would want to see. Okay, I think there's two categories. One, I want to see one of those like anon Twitter accounts that kind of just like post about every single project, being like, oh, they kind of like rage on every product.
The alignment,
the alignment anons.
Bros. Yes, the alignment anons. Because I just think they're like insanely funny, right?
Oh, they're hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's some good takes, some bad takes, but it would just be good to hear like their actual thinking in person. Mm-hmm. And the second one I think is just like, yeah, I guess like, maybe I'll need to give a second
nice
thought.
second answer.
Yeah.
I also have two answers. My first is, of course, I want to see some Minitia teams and teams building on the Interwoven stack.
Yeah.
Nice.
And second, I want to see Zahir or Split Capital and DCF God.
I've asked Zahir, but he was, I think he was in like a podcast marathon. So it was like, we're going to give it some time.
I think Zahir has just been this big proponent of like liquid market investing, and that's obviously becoming more of a popular thing in crypto because we have all these massive VC-backed coins going to zero, and so there are opportunities, and he's thinking about it right. And then I think DCF God has just been like a phenomenal builder in Web 2 and Web 3 and has been like a great positive actor to crypto for like 5 years. And so I think he is just like a great DeFi person to talk to.
Yeah, that's true. We'd love to have DCF God on. Stan, does Quart count as an alignment anon?
I don't think so, but he's an interesting person as well. I saw him on a different podcast. Yeah, I think all of these are kind of interesting.
We were the first. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, because I think they kind of play down their knowledge. They just kind of like meme around, but I think they're like probably actually in real life relatively intelligent individuals. So it'd just be cool to hear some of their perspectives.
Yeah. You got to read the docs to talk shit, you know?
Sure.
That's when it hits. That's like, it's funny because it's true. You know?
They're like looking through your code base.
I've been trying to get Quart back on again because we were the first to have him on back in January 2023 before he was the Quart everybody knows and loves today. So, but he has his own podcast now. It's funny to think that he's like mainly a BTC maxi, and so which is pretty funny to think about. But yeah. But anyway, so where can people find you guys? Where can people find Initia?
Initia.xyz. Hit it up. And Initia FND. One of those two on twitter.com.
FDN.
Thank you, Stan.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and we hope to see you
boys.
guys soon.
Thanks for having us. I'll see you in Seoul.
See you guys in Seoul.
I'm not going to conferences anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the post-game show. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with Capital K, wrapping up an episode with Initia, the two generals of the Initia militia. Got all into interwoven rollups. Kit, you went deep into the docs on this one. So I'm curious, like, did they answer all your questions for you? Did this like reach expectations, exceed expectations?
No, they definitely did, and you know, also disclosure, like I've known Zon and the team, so I definitely am familiar with the project. I do not have any financial interest in it though, but you know, obviously I huge fan of the team, huge fan of them, so any way I can support, I'd love to. And in terms of the actual product, what is amazing is how they literally took the best of what everybody kind of built, tweaked it a little bit, and made it so much better. And as you can tell also is there's always room for improvement. So even in the docs itself, they're like, hey, you know, there are things that you can change as things develop. And I think that's the absolute mindset you kind of got to take. And, you know, you could copy paste, but make sure you copy paste and then change something, right? You know, that meme was like, hey, at least change the answer, bro, when you copy the test. Yeah. So that, I think they did that and so much more. So I'm very excited to see this blockchain come out.
They really took a step back and be like, okay, let's hold up here. We've been building, we've been building like in this L1 monolithic direction. We kind of tried to like slap modularity on top of it with like L2s. And like what we came up with, like what was the result and consequences of this was kind of like how every whether it's like an L2 or Cosmos chain, they're trying to like take value for themselves. And that's not their fault. That's just like the circumstances that each
that's
L2
the situation,
chain
right?
was
Exactly.
like dealt with. Like that's how like, and like no one could have like predicted like what a interwoven world could look like. And so they had the foresight to see like, okay, like this is good. Appchains will be a thing. Appchains will be a thing. Let's make it easy for people to build Appchains. And so this is kind of like the successor, not successor, but like kind of like the thinking of like Cosmos that everyone's kind of being like the successor of as it is, but like actually executing on it.
Yeah. And not only that, they're very clever in their product choice too. Like MoveVM, CosmWasm, and EVM, you know, those three pretty much captures everything, right? Say CosmWasm, right? EVM, obviously everything else. MoveVM, Sui, Aptos movement, right? All the top ecosystems, they already accounted for. And I think, you know, Zon is absolutely right about the Solana and SVM. It's like, you know, you build on SVM because you want to be on Solana and part of that gang. So you're not going to leave. So it's a very good choice.
And that's so much less of a technical lift for them. So I guess they can see how like other SVMs do and whatnot. I wonder if they'll add Ton VM.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
I mean, Ton had a moment. I mean, but well, I guess they'll add VMs as like demand, as they see demand for them. So, but no, this is a great episode. I've seen Zani at all the conferences. I don't that was such a dagger at the beginning. I'm like, oh no, bearish. When he was like, oh, bearish, I'm like, oh no, but no, like Zani's a great dude. Super sharp. Same thing with Stan. That was my first time talking to him. Also very sharp. And you know, can't wait for Initia to come out. And if you want to keep track of everything that's in the world, crypto, DeFi, all that's in between, you know what to do. Hit that bell button, subscribe, give us a like, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you love it, you hate it, let us know. Follow us on all of our socials. On X, I'm saying X now because I feel like there's been an inflection point between saying Twitter and X. So X, on X, TikTok, and Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And we'll see you next week. Peace. Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.